The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Is Hunter Renfrow now the heir apparent to Adam Thielen in the slot here in Carolina? And how will the wide receiver competition shake out?
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast.
And we'll start off by talking about the wide receiver position, as Fred has a question as it pertains to Hunter Renfrow, who signed on Sunday here to Carolina, saying, being that Hunter Renfrow's a good slot guy, do you think he's the Panthers' midterm replacement for Adam Thielen? This is likely Adam's last year, and Hunter is 29. He should at least factor in to be Thielen's short-term replacement after this year. Thoughts, or am I looking too far into a basic wide receiver signing? Yeah, I would think that there would be an opportunity for Hunter Renfrow, rather, to be the replacement to Adam Thielen there in the slot for Carolina. When you look back at his career with the Raiders, he got off to a really good start. His first 2 years had 600 yards receiving both those seasons. 2021, he was a Pro Bowler. The last two seasons he spent there in 22 and 23, his numbers weren't that great, just over 300 yards receiving in both of those years. And I don't pay attention to what happens with the Raiders, so I don't really know what was going on there. We can certainly talk to our guy Q Myers of Locked On Raiders at some point this off season in the coming weeks to figure out what was going on there with Adam in his final time, his final couple of years there with the Raiders. But we know recently what led him to not play last year was that he was dealing with a autoimmune condition, ulcerative colitis, which had him lose weight. He had fatigue, had high fevers. He had a quote from a story from Darren Gann on Panthers.com earlier this week saying, quote, "Last year I fluctuated in weight. I went down to 150 pounds. I had like 7 straight days of 103-degree fevers. It's tough to play when you're not feeling great." Yeah, it is tough to do anything when you have a 103-degree fever for a full week straight. My God, I can't even imagine. But after spending a year consulting with doctors and getting the condition under control, he's ready to make his comeback, and he's now at 187 pounds to play at 185. So 35 pounds below his playing weight is where he was at last year dealing with that condition. So good to hear that he's back and healthy. Now, I think we have to see just how healthy he is and how up to speed he is as far as, playing at the NFL level again after you miss a year when you're dealing with something like that. And I don't know how long he's been dealing with that could certainly set you back as far as trying to get back into game shape, which he has plenty of time to do that, as competition for that job, at least as far as trying to make the roster this year, really won't start until we get to the second or third week of training camp in August. So we still have a ways to go. Hunter, rather. God, he has all this time over the next month with OTAs and a mandatory minicamp to really get to speed. So we'll see whether that's how it plays out. But right now, I think it's a little bit too early to say that's what's going to happen, as there's still a lot of competition in that room. And speaking of the competition in that wide receiver room, Nick asking, at what point do we stop caring about knowing the system, he puts in quotes, in regards to keeping David Moore around? Dude is not a good NFL wide receiver, and there's much more talent upside with other players on the roster. Jalen Coker and Hunter Renfrow are better already, and the potential of Jimmy Horn Jr., Kobe Hudson, and Jacoby George is clearly higher than where Moore currently is. Jimmy Horn Jr. Was the 6th-round pick from Colorado, and then there's reports that they've signed Kobe Hudson and Jacoby George as undrafted free agents. Looking at Moore's last season here in Carolina, he played in 17 games, starting 5, had 32 receptions, 351 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's the most since 2020 when he was in Seattle right before coming to Carolina the first time around and not making the roster. I don't want to sit here and act as if like David Moore wasn't a contributor from last season, because he absolutely was. When Deontay Johnson didn't pan out and they traded him, when Adam Thielen missed 7 weeks, when Coker missed some time, Leggett, he also had his ups and downs. David Moore was a nice addition for this team. And this is a coaching staff that obviously knows him from his time in Seattle. You look at when he was not in the league, Dave Canales gave an opportunity in 2023 down in Tampa Bay, and he did a lot more last year than I would have ever expected out of David Moore because of the injuries, but also I did not think he still had that in him, and he did show it. But you are right. There are some younger players like Jalen Coker, like Hunter Renfrow, who's already been a Pro Bowler, but Coker especially, and then some guys that they're going to bring in who are going to have an opportunity to at least compete and try to make the 53, more likely the practice squad, I would think, with guys like Hudson and Jacoby George. And I really like what George did the last couple of years at Miami last year, especially catching balls from Cam Ward. But it's not going to be easy to crack the rotation and to make the roster at wide receiver. When you look at it, Adam Thielen, Xavier Legette, Tedero McMillan, those are the only three guys I think that are absolutely secure as far as making the roster this upcoming season in that wide receiver room. Now, last year they did keep 7, back when Dave Canales said it was the deepest position on the roster. Eventually, once they got to the waiver wire, which they had the first waiver priority, they cut Jalen Coker and they cut Amir Smith-Marset, who had also been injured in the preseason. So he was probably not going to make it around anyways, but they cut those 2 guys and we're down to only 5 receivers. David Moore was one of them. If they're going to keep 7 this year, again, Thielen, Legette, McMillan, they're good. I'm guessing if Renfrow is truly healthy and back to his old self, he's going to make the team. So that's 4. I feel good about Jalen Coker getting an opportunity. So that's 5. And then it comes down to, okay, if you're gonna keep 7 more, then David Moore probably makes a team. Maybe Jimmy Horn Jr. makes a team. Like, I would count on those guys all making it more so than going after another undrafted player. And I understand that it worked out for Coker last year. I do not think that's going to be the norm in Carolina, that an undrafted free agent is going to make the roster every single year and come in and actually make a big impact. Like they had 2 last year. You saw Damani Richardson, you saw Jalen Coker. There was opportunity. It was the worst team in the NFL the year prior. So there were opportunities for those guys to make the team, and they did. Now, of course, Coker got cut, but then came back. Richardson stayed on the entire year. I just think as this roster gets better, it's going to make it a little bit difficult for those guys who did not get drafted to be able to make the team. So we'll see. I don't think David Moore is useless. I'm not going to sit here and confidently say that Colby Hudson and Jacoby George are better players than him, as they have never played in the NFL. And it's damn hard to go from being a good college player to even being a player who can make an NFL roster. We see it every single year. I am excited, though, to see what the wide receiver room looks like once we finally do get to training camp and see how things shake out once we get to the initial 53. And if they do indeed keep 7 again, or if they decide to only keep 5 or 6, all that, I'm very interested to see how it plays out here in Carolina.
Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. And with 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. XPass Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller is required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen.
The Dallas Cowboys kicked off rookie minicamps this weekend.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast.
We're going to talk about Dallas Cowboys rookie minicamp that started, I believe, on Thursday. Pretty light practices, Landon, if you could even call them practices. Before we get into some of the takeaways, what goes on in these rookie minicamps?
Well, a lot of it is just trying to catch up to where the vets are, right? Like, just, at this point, it's about getting them up to speed. We've talked before about how a lot of these early practices, even with the vets, are about learning how to practice, like practicing practice, right? And kind of understanding how to move inside of a typical practice so that there's no wasted time or wasted motion or confusion. And I think a lot of this early on stuff is very, very, very basic stuff. Really, even the on-field portion is probably very level 101 technique stuff, just to kind of see these guys on the field, kind of get to know the coaches and the players, and just for everybody to kind of get the tone of what it's like on the field with each other. And again, I think a lot of kind of catching up on terminology, making sure these rookies know what's expected of them, making sure they understand how these practices are going to go, so that by the time that they have to like line up with the vets and they get into OTAs and minicamp, they're not slowing practice down by asking questions about how the practice is supposed to go, or where am I supposed to go next, or how am I supposed to do this drill. They should have all that knowledge kind of in hand, so that when they're on the field, by the time OTAs start, they're actually working on getting better, instead of like being focused about doing the correct drill, or doing the drill in the correct way, instead of the actual technique behind the drill.
It's learning how to practice. That's really what these couple of days are. So there's no contact, there's no pads, except for, I saw one of your comments on Twitter that Tyler Booker looks like he's wearing shoulder pads. That was honestly probably the biggest takeaway for the weekend, is he's just as big as you think he is. He's way bigger.
Blots out the sun. I mean, just like, you saw different shots of him and just kind of on the move, and he just, and that's kind of what I took away from his tape too, is that, I mean, the guy just already looks like an NFL guard. Like he's, like he's a 5-year vet. And I think you saw a little bit of that with his body, just a very mature, not just like, sometimes you see with these bigger, stronger guys, they're like almost a little too cut, and it feels like he has muscle that's been lived in for a little while, and that he's had for a while. So I think, there's power behind those hands clearly, and you can see it in his shoulders, like I was joking. But I think, that is part of this, right? Is like kind of getting these guys out, seeing what they look like on the field with helmets and all that on, and how do they look compared to the other guys, and, just kind of getting a size comparison of these guys. It's all very much part of this early first steps.
Yeah. And believe it or not, that kind of matters. Like when you watch these guys on tape, or you watch them at the combine, again, they don't have pads, they don't have helmets on at the combine. It's just different. But when you get them out on the NFL field, like I'll give you an example. I thought Donovan Ezeraku, the Cowboys' second-round pick, he looks like a linebacker on the field a little bit, and that's a little scary. Then you see these really, really long arms he has, and that's why this is going to work. He's so quick. He's got a massive wingspan. He's going to have to win with speed and quickness. But that's how he does win. Like he's not a power player, so it's okay. I think another one is Phil Maffa, the Cowboys running back that they drafted in the 7th round. You see him like standing next to Jaden Blue, and it's like, okay, I could see how this might work.
Yeah, and honestly, a guy we're going to talk about here in a little bit is Savone Ravel. Like I thought, him on the field, like just he's not really working out as much, but he's on the field with everybody and kind of going through this stuff. And he's so big, that was like surprising. He almost looked like a safety out there. So it is good to see these guys in the field. I think it's good for the coaches to kind of get an idea. A lot of these guys they've been up close with before, but to get them on your field and get up close to them and kind of see exactly what you've got. It kind of helps you conceptualize how you're going to use the player a little bit more.
Now, I do have 2 takeaways. And again, remember, they're not really doing any football-related things at these mini camps. Don't overreact. But 2 takeaways, and it starts with the head coach. It seems like Brian Schottenheimer's energy and attitude is catching on in this locker. It seems like the players really, really are buying in. And again, it's rookie mini camp. These guys are excited to be out there. But everything that we've seen from his, first press conference as a head coach to what people have been saying about him, it does feel like the locker room is buying into what he's telling.
Yeah, I mean, energy is just the word that you kind of hear over and over again, right? Like you hear him talk about like when these guys get asked like, hey, what was it like on your visit? And you're like, oh man, I just really love the coach's energy, right? And then they talked about like, what's it like been in Dallas with these coaches so far? Man, they got such a great energy. It's infectious energy is what they talk about. And I do think that that's not coincidental that we just kind of constantly are hearing that. So, I do wonder, it's a younger coaching staff to be sure, right? I mean, Schottenheimer himself is not specifically young, even though he's a first-time head coach, but I think a lot of these other guys are. And especially when you bring guys in from college, I think there's just a different energy that's
can I compare it to something?
Please.
Again, this other coach is way older, but the energy reminds me a little bit of like Pete Carroll, where it just seems, it just seems like guys are excited to play for him, right? And again, it's not a coincidence. I think Brian Schottenheimer coached under Pete Carroll. It's just kind of the vibe you get when you listen to him and you listen to players talk about Brian Schottenheimer.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think that he probably took that away from Pete. Like, hey, being the kind of impetus of energy for your team is something that is important. And look, I mean, I think that the kind of way you treat people and the way you behave, like that's probably more Marty, right? But I don't think it's outrageous to suggest that the kind of pep in your step, the kind of always being up, the always being positive, the kind of being focused and energetic in the job. Marty was like that too, to be sure. But it's hard not to look at that and see Pete specifically, right? And like what he was like in Seattle.
The other takeaway, and again, take all this with a grain of salt because there's no pads, no hitting, nothing. It seems like Tyler Booker is already winning over his teammates with his leadership and his attitude. And I mean, obviously the Cowboys loved his play at guard at Alabama, and that's number one reason why you draft him at 12. But I do think they wanted another leader like this just on the offensive side of the ball. And I think you're already seeing that play out a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's even kind of, look, even the day before the draft, the whispers that we heard is like they're looking to try to add a lead. They could be looking to add a leader that group, and I think it makes sense. Like you lost Zach Martin. I think you like Tyler Smith, and I think you like the guys that you have in that group. But as far as like leadership qualities, like T-Book takes it to a whole other level, right? Like I mean, he's just a different kind of guy in the best possible way. So adding him to those already kind of lead by example type folks, I think just really takes the direction of that group, all kind of lining up behind him. Just, it really makes a lot of sense. And one thing I'll just add too, going back, there was a story about Nick Saban talking about how T-Book was the leader of that team when Saban was there and T-Book was still only a sophomore. They talked about he talked about how T-Book was the leader of Alabama's offense as a true sophomore. And I mean, I think that shows you the kind of guy we're dealing with here.
Yeah, he's going to be a fun one to kind of watch and see how he develops as a leader, because it sure seems like he's already won right now. And you saw the clip, was it with Bleacher Report and Micah Parsons, where Mike, I don't know if Micah was all that thrilled with the pick. I'm not saying he didn't like it, but once he got face to face with talking with Tyler Booker, he was like standing up and clapping. He was that excited. So if Tyler Booker can have that kind of impact in the locker room, it's going to go way beyond what he can do on the football field. So excited to see that play out.
There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute Major League Baseball showdown or soaking up the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge until Gametime. With last-minute deals, all-in prices, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Plus, ticket prices actually drop as the beginning of the game gets closer, so you can score amazing seats at a great price. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's talk about J.J. McCarthy. This is a great time to remind you where we were at with J.J. McCarthy. Kevin O'Connell went on the Up and Adams show with Kay Adams. Kay Adams asked him a couple of like softball questions about J.J. McCarthy. Why isn't he the starter? He's taking like first team reps and stuff, right? And O'Connell kind of danced around all of it. in a way that I'm sure a lot of people will run with. So I kind of want to talk about that, but that will lead us into a conversation about what the expectation from the Vikings has been for McCarthy so far, and what we know about that, what we can't know about that, and what we can sort of surmise it's going to be moving forward. So that's going to be a lot of review of stuff we talked about around this time last year. If you recall, last year, going into training camp and throughout training camp, mechanics were a big part of this show. Like real intricate, tiny little detailed stuff. What is the angle of his toe when he throws? What is his back foot doing on the follow through? These tiny little details. And it led us to do a lot of like Zapruder filming of like the, promo videos that the Vikings would release. And we're going to go right back into doing that. I'm not going to be one of those people that says, don't overthink that. Of course, it's the quarterback of the future for the Vikings. We are absolutely dissecting every little frame and every little pixel that we can. This is Locked On Vikings, not Locked On Casual, okay? Get with the program. But I did find it kind of funny when O'Connell was asked, okay, like, why haven't we named him the starter? That was like the direct quote. That was the Kay Adams question. Why haven't you named him the starter? And O'Connell gave a sort of non-answer, but I think in it are the seeds of what we can sort of say. He's like, well, we can't even line up defensive players against him. So he very much seems to expect to name JJ McCarthy the starter very quickly, but is not anointing him with it in the formal sense. I think that's a little silly. I think he's being a little bit too extra careful, but I also know that Kevin O'Connell, he is nice to the media, but he is extraordinarily distrusting of the media. And the way that he has behaved, the way that the team has been toward media, especially unestablished, not Strib and ESPN, but the sort of people around the edges that used to be at camp and aren't at camp, right? And I'm not even talking about me. I went to camp once and haven't been able to get a credential since. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about people who were in training camp for years and years and years, who went for 13, 14 years in a row and now suddenly can't do it. And that's an O'Connell thing. Or at least it changed with this regime, right? And so I think that there is this really strong distrust of the media, and for a pretty good reason. Anytime O'Connell says something that is worded a little funny, even though you can watch the interview and know exactly what he means, it's going to be worded a little funny, and so the machine is going to take it. And everybody's going to write their headlines, and all the aggregators are going to have their little tweets, and everybody's going to go crazy, and I'm going to end up on a radio show 3 weeks from now talking to somebody in Arizona going, why do they hate JJ McCarthy? Are they going to trade for Sam Darnold or something like that? And it's a cycle that I can understand why O'Connell is annoyed by. I get annoyed by it too, a lot on this show. But you have to understand that it comes from that place. And so I think the reason he's hesitant to say it is because he doesn't want a world where McCarthy twists his ankle and Sam Howell plays great like Sam Darnold did, and then it's week 3 and they're going, I don't know, maybe we want to ride the hot hand, but we also said back in May on a podcast with Kay Adams that I made him QB1, and they don't want that complicating things. I kind of get it, but I don't think that it necessarily tells me that they actually distrust JJ McCarthy. I don't get that sense at all. And I feel like we've all been doing this long enough, right? Like I get a lot of people in like YouTube comments who send me emails that are like, I've been watching the Vikings for 55 years. It's like, cool, good for you. So you've seen the way coaches talk when there actually is a QB battle, right? Like you saw the way Mike Zimmer talked about Christian Ponder, right? Like you see the way that Brad Childress talked about Tavares Jackson and Sage Rosenfels in the offseason before Favre showed up. Like there is a certain nomenclature for how a coach will talk about a quarterback who's in a genuine competition And then there's a way that coaches talk about a quarterback who is not in a competition. And just because they don't want the headline monsters taking crap out of context, they're going to say some non-answer crap that you can't use. And that's what I think is happening here. It is the unknown unknowns fear thing. And to be frank with you, I think it's kind of stupid. I think Kevin O'Connell is way too paranoid about this. I think it's absolutely idiotic. You don't say anything, media is going to run with it. You do say anything, media is going to run with it. We all got jobs to do. We all put out our stuff. Okay. I put out a podcast every day and everybody else is like that too. You probably just say what you mean, dude. But that's the way he is. And you have to like understand that that's the perspective that things are coming from. And Kwesi's the same way. So they're going to make him beat Sam Howell in a competition. If they really wanted that to be serious, they would have gotten a more serious competition than Sam Howell, or I guess Brett Rippon, if you really, and those two will be in competition with each other. That I think is real. But I think if anybody's trying to look you dead in the eye and be like, the Vikings are going to bench JJ McCarthy for Sam Howell, I think you just need to smack them upside the head, or like throw cold water on them or something, because they're dreaming. They're in La La Land. All that said, there are still things that I think JJ McCarthy needs to prove. And those things are along his path of development. So let's get into the kind of the review part of this, where what we covered last year is really informative to where we are now. JJ McCarthy came out of school with a throwing motion that was unacceptable at the pro level. You can see that this is not his throwing motion anymore. What he did in college wasn't going to fly on Sundays. And the big part of it was he would over-rotate. He would throw that dang thing too hard. If you watch a baseball pitcher throw the ball, watch their back foot come after the ball has been thrown, their back foot will swing all the way up and around and then land in front of them to catch their balance, because they've thrown it so hard that they've thrown themselves off of balance, right? That's how a baseball pitcher does the thing. McCarthy threw a football the same way. But if you watch some of the really good mechanical quarterbacks throw, I think right now, I think of like Goff. I think of actually Jordan Love, really good mechanical quarterback nowadays after, 7 years of sitting back and learning before anybody had any expectations for him. But, now he's deep enough in his career to have really, really nice throwing mechanics. I don't want to look at like Mahomes. He does a lot of stuff that's different and weird that kind of only he can get away with. But, look at the older quarterbacks, Stafford, Geno, those guys that, if you watch their back foots come through, you want the kiss. I talked about this last week too, and a ton last year. Think about the Princess Diaries. You want your foot to kind of pop up a little bit. That's what you want it to look like. You want one foot on the ground and one with the toe just kissing the ground with your hips square to your target. That's where you want to end. McCarthy was coming all the way through. And it was caused by two different issues. One, just a mechanical hitch in his giddy up, got to get a better habit. But two, it came from the idea that he was always throwing it too hard, that there was never touch. He would never try to go for the touch club in his bag. He would just try to zip it out there. And when you're trying to throw a 40-yard go route and you try to zip it out there, you end up throwing 3 interceptions to Bowling Green, which is kind of how that went down. Those were a lot of bad throws deep, because he was trying to zip it. Again, two things totally unacceptable at the pro level that they had to figure out and deal with. Very fixable things, and not things that take a long time to fix. So O'Connell and the Vikings were pretty comfortable with that in terms of drafting him. But they had to do it. And so the process of fixing those things, like my theory was they were going to try to fix those things. Coming out of the draft, it's like, okay, that's bad. They're probably going to want to fix that. And then watching it actually progress, practice in and practice out as kind of proof positive that the Vikings were seeing this the same way was really cool.